bringing some level of hope to your lives. We will continue to do this as a nation. As you go through, as the Chief of Defense Staff says, every second of your life. I also want to acknowledge Jackson, Crawford, who are also on the craft, and by God's grace, we still have them with us today. Only a few days ago, in their memory, I think Jackson would dedicate his achievement of becoming an engineer in Air Corps. And we want to compliment him. And I know those men who laid their lives for our country would have been enormously proud to know that in endurance, in an act of faith, and a test of character, he was able to complete his engineering qualifications and now is an engineer in the Guyana Defense Force, and we applaud that. Many may not recall, but a year ago around this time, our country came under a real threat. One of the strongest threats to our sovereignty and territorial integrity. A threat that seemed determined to test our national resolve, to test our level of readiness, to test the caliber of our men and women in uniform. It was only about a year ago that we went through a painful period of our history when our sovereignty was tested. And I want to remind all of us in Guyana that these men were on a mission at a time when we were facing our greatest security threat as a country. And they were on a mission in response to that threat. They were on a mission to support an integral part of our operational readiness during this period of immense threat to our territorial integrity and sovereignty. They were on a mission to exercise their oath of office in protecting every square inch of Guyana and protecting every Guyanese. And we must never, for one moment, forget the period that this accident took place and the circumstances surrounding that period and what the mission of these men were in that period. That is why their loss is magnified in unbelievable ways. It is deep. It is deep and it's connected to our national sovereignty and defense. Before I proceed, I would also like to commend the Chief of Defense Staff and all our men and women in uniform for the support that was afforded to this family. I would also like to recognize my own National Security Advisor, who I asked to be on the site and to be there continuously because we have a responsibility. But there are three persons also. I also want to recognize the immediate past Chief of Staff, Godfrey Best, who was there. But I want to recognize Colonel Howell, Barnett, Lorraine, and Colonel Roberts also. Because these four individuals took the personal responsibility and of course weeks to work with the families. And I know Colonel Howell continues every day, because I would call on him to ensure that the connection to the families is not lost. The Chief of Defense Staff was tasked with ensuring the continued support, soft, as well as other support mechanism be in place. This was a new period in the history of our defense force. Many not catered for, most of what was required not catered for in regulations or rules. But we at the Defense Board have that responsibility to ensure that we leave a mechanism of support for our men and women in uniform who would give their life and leave us under these circumstances. So we gather this morning with heavy hearts and solemn spirits to pay tribute to 5 extraordinary men who made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. Retired Brigadier Gary Beaton, Colonel Michael Shahood, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Charles, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Welcome, and Warrant Officer Class 2, Jason Khan. 1 year has passed since the fatal helicopter crash that claimed their lives. Yet the grief of their passing remains as fresh as the day it occurred. Today we do not seek to relive the anguish of that tragic moment, but to celebrate the ideals and values these men represented, ideals that continue to inspire us as a nation. These 5 heroes were more than just members of the Guyana Defense Force. They were fathers, husbands, brothers, and sons who dedicated their lives to a cause greater than themselves. And that is the first reminder I want to give to all of us, that as we recognize their contribution to our country, we must not forget that they were fathers, they were husbands, they were brothers, and they were sons. And that is why we pay enormous tribute to the families. We celebrate you, we uplift you, and we acknowledge you. And we know and can imagine the magnitude of pain that you continue to feel. And it is only faith that helps us through circumstances like these. And one may say, what is our duty in faith? All of these brothers came from the Christianity faith. And in Paul 1:4, the entire book of Paul teaches us a lot about faith and what are the attributes of faith and the characteristics of faith. And in Paul 1:4, it speaks about faith as an extension of sympathy. Faith being sympathetic. That one of the virtues of faith is our ability to share sympathy with those who are in pain. And that is why for us who are alive and have faith, we have to understand what a sympathetic mind is and how important sympathy is as part of exercising faith. Paul 1:4 says, in exercising this faith of sympathy, as I remember your tears, as we as a nation remember the tears of these beautiful families, as we as a government, as surviving men and women in uniform, remember the tears of these families, it is incumbent upon us, not by what I'm saying, but by faith, to continually exercise sympathy. In the story of Paul and Timothy, it also tells us that faith is a unifying force. And in that tragic moment a year ago, we saw how our country demonstrated faith by unifying around our men and women in uniform and unifying around these families and our servicemen. But that aspect of faith cannot be a moment in time. It has to be continuous. And to the families, I would say that part of the story of Paul and Timothy in speaking about the unification of faith is how they use circumstances to come together as a family, to come together as a community, and to intensify the unity within the family itself. And in this case, I extend the unity of the family to be the Guyana Defense Force and all who constitute that body. That this circumstance should enhance our faith, and we should demonstrate that enhancement by the continuous unification. Faith is also powerful. In Paul 1:7, it speaks about faith as a powerful tool in exercising self-control. And I know that sometimes when we go through pain, especially for the families, such harsh circumstances, such immediate circumstances, they left home alive and full of life. And to receive that news, it required the family members themselves to exercise a huge amount of self-control, because they themselves would have been questioning faith and questioning why. But the very fact that we have you here today with your children and the love that you're pouring to your children and family and the way in which you have kept your family together, we have to salute you. We have to honor you. And I want to thank you for exercising that level of faith in demonstrating self-control and converting that self-control into the aspect of faith that requires us to unify the family under every circumstances. In a time of the most serious threat to our nation, as I said, these fine men answered the call of duty with courage and conviction. Their mission was not one of aggression or hostility, but of preparation to ensure the safety and security of our motherland and the safety and security of all their comrades who would have had to use the Ettering Bang airstrip that was totally unsafe and inefficient at that moment. It is said that true patriotism is about being willing to sacrifice for one's country. For these men, duty was not just an obligation, it was a calling. When our nation needed them most, they did not hesitate. They placed their commitment to Guyana above their personal interests, demonstrating a selflessness that distinguishes patriots from ordinary mortals. Retired Brigadier Gary Beaton was a towering figure in the Guyana Defense Force, known for his unwavering dedication and leadership. Throughout his illustrious career, he set a standard of excellence that inspired countless others to serve with honor and distinction. Colonel Michael Shahood, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Charles, and Lieutenant Colonel Son Welcome were pillars of professionalism and expertise, men who led with both their hearts and minds, earning the respect and admiration of all who served alongside them. Warrant Officer Class 2, Jason Khan, was highly skilled and professional. Warrant Officer Jason Khan was part of our military elite corps. His dedication, discipline, and commitment to duty reflected his character and the values instilled in every member of our defense force. These men were bound by a shared commitment to the principles of service, sacrifice, and patriotism. They understood the risk inherent in their profession, yet embraced them willingly, knowing that their efforts were vital to the security and well-being of their citizens, of their fellow citizens. They served not for personal glory, but out of a profound sense of duty, a duty to protect, to defend, and to uphold sovereignty of our nation. Their tragic loss reminds us of the immense sacrifices made by those who wear the uniform. It is easy to take for granted the peace and stability we enjoy, but the peace often comes at a high cost, a cost borne by brave men and women like retired Brigadier Beaton, Colonel Michael Shahood, Lieutenant Colonel Charles, and Welcome, and Warrant Officer Class 2 Khan. Their service was a shield for us all, and their sacrifice has strengthened the foundations of our nation. The price of peace is often paid in sacrifice and commitment. For nations, peace demands investment in diplomacy, defense, and the well-being of citizens, often requiring brave individuals to stand as guardians against forces that threaten stability. The price may be high, sometimes involving profound loss, but the dividends of peace, a life free from fear, a society built on trust, and a future full of possibilities are immeasurable and enduring. On a personal note, since assuming office as Commander-in-Chief and having the opportunity to interact with our men and women in uniform, I would say that I regret that I never signed up or joined the military, because I have seen a level of commitment, discipline, love, and patriotism for our country that is unbelievable. And I'm proud every day to be a part of the lives of these men and women and to see from a front seat view your work every day. A grateful nation never forgets its heroes. Their names are etched not only in the annals of our history, but also in the hearts of all Guyanese. We honor them by remembering their deeds and by drawing inspiration from their lives. They remind us that a true measure of a person is not in what they acquire, but in what they give. These 5 men gave everything. But remembrance alone is not enough. The best way to honor their memory is to continue the mission they so valiantly undertook. We must strive to make our country safe from all forms of external and internal threats. This is not a task for the Guyana Defense Force alone. It is a collective responsibility that requires the commitment of every citizen. Let us build a nation that reflects the ideals of these men, what they stood for: unity, resilience, and shared purpose. Let us support the men and women of the Guyana Defense Force and our joint forces, ensuring they have the resources and respect they need to perform their duties. And let us instill in future generations the values of service and sacrifice that these 5 men exemplified. You know, looking back at these 5 men, I cannot help but reflect on Proverbs 13:22. And Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And inheritance is not measured here in monetary form. Because when God speaks to us about faith, it is not materialistic faith. It is faith that is deeper than the materialistic aspect of the world. So when God speaks in when Hebrews 13:22 speak to us, it is telling us about what constitutes good men. And it says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And notice, it did not say to your children. And if we reflect on our personal lives, many of us, referring to our childhood days, go to our grandparents. Just think about it. We speak about the role our grandparents play in our life. And here in Hebrews 13:22, it is telling, the point that the scripture is making is that it is not only for the immediate, your children, it is for generations after generations. That the life good men leave, the examples good men leave, the sacrifices good men leave, all of the beauty, the patriotism, the nationalistic thinking, the love for country that these 5 good men left behind is for their children and their children's children. It is for generations of Guyanese. And it's incumbent upon us, the living, to ensure that this inheritance is not lost. Because that's part of our faith. That is part of our faith. Because we will be held accountable. Why did we not allow the good examples of these men to live on? So I want to leave with the family Proverbs 13:22. Good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Our children will talk to their children. Of the stories of their parents, their grandparents. And Hebrews chapter 11 speak to us on a series of essentials that constitute faith. And I want to touch on 5 of those. In Hebrews chapter 11, it speaks to us about the assurance of future hope. You see, sometimes we are captured in a moment of life that we forget that the totality of life is also futuristic. That the totality of life has an element in it that Hebrews says looks beyond this life to the next. So as we look at chapter 11 of Hebrews, speaking to us about future hope and living life beyond the moment, living life to the next moment, then we will know that our life, individually and collectively, is much larger than our temporary presence in this earthly place. And when we start to understand that our life is but a temporary presence, and it looks beyond this phase, then we approach life with a different degree of purpose and a different assurance of the hope that lies in the future. But it did not stop there. In Hebrews chapter 11, it speaks about how we're going to ensure this future hope comes to us. And it says that we must live life to enhance our reputation. Live life to enhance our reputation. It is the same like Proverbs 13:22. When you leave this phase of life, how are you remembered? And these 5 men not only enhanced their reputation, they enhanced the reputation of the Guyana Defense Force, they enhanced the reputation of our men and women in uniform, and they enhanced the reputation of what service should constitute, what patriotism should contribute, and what a good citizen should constitute. And we must applaud them for leaving this reputation for us and generations to come. Finally, the final 2 points in Hebrews chapter 11 that I wish to leave with the family is: take God at His word, regardless of the consequences. And always remember that all those who wish to assess the life of your family members, there is always an external perspective that none of us control. You know, I tell my family, you go to social media, whatever people write on social media, that is the internal perspective. But my hope lies in the external perspective. The external perspective that cannot be influenced. The external perspective that is not biased. The external perspective that embodies truthfulness and faith. And that external perspective lies in the hand of God. So, regardless of the pain and the hurt and the consequences, we have a duty to continue to use the examples and inheritance of the good work of these men to uplift our own lives, the life of every Guyanese, the life of our neighbors, the life of our families, and the life of our country. So that the families of retired Brigadier Gary Beaton, Colonel Michael Shahood, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Charles, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Welcome, and Warrant Officer Class 2 Jason Khan, we offer our deepest gratitude and support. Your loss is immeasurable, but please know that your loved ones did not perish in vain. They are remembered not only as members of the Guyana Defense Force, but as national heroes whose legacy will endure for generations to come. Let us pledge to carry forward their mission with the same courage and determination they displayed. Let us honor their memory, not just with words, but with actions that reflect their values and uphold their vision for a safe and secure Guyana. May their souls rest in eternal peace, and may their sacrifice continue to guide and inspire us as we work together to build a better future, a future for all of us, united and free. Eternal gratitude to our fallen heroes. We shall never forget. Rest on, brave souls. I thank you.